I hate to play favorites, but this is probably one of my favorite episodes. We get to talk to one of the CEOs and co founders of a crypto exchange, one of Africa's largest crypto exchanges, VALR. And normally, they're talking about, trading and options and all these different crypto stuff. And this person, Farzam Ehsani, is talking about trust. He's talking about how challenging it is to operate in the African market. He's talking about how he built one of the largest African exchanges at times when there wasn't regulatory clarity in that continent. He goes into many aspects of how they can improve the market since things like FTX, Celsius, and other crypto debacles. This is probably one of my favorite episodes. I don't think you're going to expect to hear the thoughtfulness from a from a leader of a crypto exchange that you hear in this episode. Please listen all the way through. Trust me, you won't regret it. This is Stephen Sargeant, host of another episode of Around the Coin podcast. We're going to Africa to talk to Farzam Ehsani, CEO and co-founder of VALR. Farzam, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you guys are building at VALR.
Sure. So I'm the CEO and co-founder, as you mentioned. VALR is a global crypto exchange. We're headquartered in Johannesburg. We've been around for nearly 6 years. In March, it will be 6 years. My background is banking and traditional finance and consulting. And I kind of got into the belly of the beast in investment banking and wanted to kind of understand the world, because when I got into it, it was kind of the height of the Greek debt crisis in 2011, if you can remember that. And gold prices were going crazy at the time. And, we were just coming out of the global financial crisis. So I felt like our financial system was off tilt. And I wanted to see if I could learn about it from within to make it better. And then long story short, I heard about blockchain and crypto a few years later, got involved, became the blockchain lead at the largest bank in Africa. We built some stuff for them, but they didn't have the appetite at the time. Myself and my co-founders went to start off VALR in 2018. And VALR is a global crypto exchange. We offer spot markets, spot margin markets, perpetual futures markets. And we're really, I think, the big thing about what we're trying to do is we're really trying to, like many others in our industry, trying to make the financial world better, to make it recognize the oneness of humanity. That's a big kind of spiritual belief of my own, which is that humanity is one. Our financial system doesn't minister to the needs of that. It's all fragmented and siloed. We need a better financial system, and VALR is playing its role to help build that.
You kind of like skimmed over, you ran into Bitcoin like it was a grocery store. Like, oh yeah, I went to the grocery store, blockchain. Because when I first heard about it, was actually listening to this podcast back in I think it was May 2015. Bitcoin prices was about $700, if that's going to give any kind of,
Yeah.
I'd never heard about it before.
Yeah.
As an African-American, I've never heard, none of my friends were talking about it. So how did you hear about it? What was your first impressions? Or because you were diving so deep into investments, this actually made a lot more sense to you than maybe the average person?
No, far from it. When I first heard about it, it was probably, I don't know the exact date, but I think it was about 2012 when I first heard about it. And I thought it was a complete scam. It was in the news. And I remember some place in New York City was accepting Bitcoin as payment for a coffee or something crazy. And I was like, what is this stuff? And it looks weird. And then, the price in 2013 went up. I think it was to about close to $1,000 at the time, if I'm not making a mistake. And then it crashed to 150 to 200, 250, somewhere around there. And I remember when it crashed, I felt vindicated. Yeah, this thing's an absolute scam. I was right. So let me move on with my life. And then a buddy of mine called Adam had a startup in San Francisco, and he's also a member of the Baha'i community. I'm a member of the Baha'i faith. And I wrote to him and I said, hey, Adam, what are you doing with your life, man? This is beneath us. This is not worthy of what you should be doing with your life. And I said, Farzam, I think you don't understand. Let me explain a couple of things about Bitcoin and blockchain. And so we had a very long conversation. He opened my eyes in a very big way, and the rest is history, as they say.
Could you see at that time, could you ever imagine it being an asset class? Bitcoin ETF spot trading was just approved here, in the United States within the last couple of months. Could you believe it could ever get to that point? Or do you just think it was an alternative financial system for only instances like what happened with, the Greek market, Venezuela, places where hyperinflation, money's worthless post-war? Did you think it was more on the fringes, or could you see it being a big asset class back at that time when you were
So when I had the conversation with my friend, it was 2014, 2015. And I remember thinking, I told my wife about the conversation. She said, Farzam, this might be what you've been waiting for, like something that will really revolutionize finance. And so I've always, since that time, before that, obviously I thought it was a fraud and I thought it was a scam and I thought it was going away. But since I had a better understanding, I always thought that it was going to become really big. And I mean, I even at the bank put some presentations together. They're kind of making a business case. And, we had some big numbers at the time. I think the market cap of this is now 2016, 17, I think maybe 2016. The market cap of Bitcoin was about $12 billion, right? Right now it's over 1 trillion.
Right.
And we were just saying, just imagine this can go up 10x, like, it's going to be huge. And so obviously we're up nearly 100x since then. So I think it's gone much bigger than our short-term kind of indications. But I also think we're still very, very early, Stephen. So I think we're definitely, Bitcoin prices above $500, $600, $700,000 easy, because $700,000 is parity between Bitcoin market value and gold market value.
Right.
And as I always say, anything digital, and I view Bitcoin as like a digital version of gold, I think it's going to outstrip its analog version by a huge margin. So I think we're still very, very early.
And, a lot of people are like $500,000, $600,000 Bitcoin doesn't make sense. When I was listening to this podcast and it was at $700, Brian Romley, who was the host of the podcast, said, I envision a $10,000 Bitcoin. And at that time, it was like blasphemy. Like, I don't even think he was allowed on Twitter after that because of the amount of probably hate messages he was getting. And then, it goes to 17,000 and it's like, oh, like when you see that vision, it's the same thing, right? Bitcoin at 1,000 going to 10,000 is
Correct.
exactly what you're saying. Bitcoin at 50,000 going to 500,000. And although this is not investment advice, you can see the parallels of the conversation and what a decade, how things can change. You talked about the big bank that you were working with in South Africa. They were actually part of the South African Financial Blockchain Consortium. And you were, I think, were a chairperson at the time in 2017. What were the conversations? Because it seems like at that time they were very openly talking about blockchain, business use cases. I'm curious, what were the conversations with your organization and maybe some of the other members? Because there was also regulators in that consortium as well, which is unheard of, right?
Yeah. We were very early, and actually it was a fantastic consortium. The conversations, first of all, we met once a month for about, I think, 2 to 3 hours a month. So it wasn't every week or anything like that. It was once a month. The regulators were there. So we had the National Treasury that was there. We had the Financial Sector Conduct Authority. I think we have representatives from the Reserve Bank, which is the central bank in South Africa. And basically the breadth and kind of the diversity of knowledge was huge, right? There were some people that were breathing and living this, and there were other people that had no idea what this was. And so the intention of that forum was really to allow people to come and just get educated, for us to talk about it, right? For us to understand, what are the trends? Where is this going? What would the regulatory regimes need to look like? And even before what the regulatory regimes would need to look like, what is this stuff? Like, what is blockchain technology? I remember 2016-ish, when I was bringing this up with the bank, I was like, hey, I've heard about, actually it was between 2015 to 2016. I said, I heard about this blockchain technology. Like, are we doing stuff like that in the bank? And I would talk to people and like, oh yeah. We've got a whole team working on blockchain. Oh yeah, blockchain. Oh yeah, we've done that. We've done that. And I was like, oh wow, okay, people are really, they're amazing. They're ahead of their time. Then I just realized that people are just, people's egos get in the way, and they don't want to admit that they don't understand what this is. They're like, oh yeah. And then I realized actually nobody's doing anything in the bank. They say
like an Excel
some guy knows how to spell blockchain.
It's an Excel spreadsheet with the title blockchain.
Pretty much. And actually, I say some guy knows how to spell blockchain. Even that, they didn't know. Is blockchain one word? Is it 2 words?
It's like hyphenated.
Exactly. So I think it was just very early. The conversations and the intention of that forum was really just to bring a diverse set of stakeholders together to understand what the power of this technology is and where it could possibly go, and to hopefully create a welcoming environment for the technology and the asset class in the South African context, which is what that forum was for.
Now, during that time, we talked about 2017, 2018. In 2021, Africa got rocked by AfriCrypt, which was a crypto exchange think it was like $3.6 billion worth of cryptocurrency.
It wasn't that high. That's what
that's what the news says.
That's what the news, and that's actually, just sorry to interrupt, but
no. I think it's important. We want to hear facts.
That's one of the few times, not a few times, but actually one of the earliest times. This happened many times since then, when I realized, wow, these major outlets around the world, Bloomberg, Reuters, etc., are regurgitating stuff that they have not checked the facts on. And because this was in our backyard in South Africa, right? So we could kind of, and also we run an exchange. So, and right now we're like 60 to 70% of the market. We kind of know what the flows are of people, and we know what the market flows are. And like the flows that they were talking about exceeded the flows in the entire market. It's not even possible. And so what actually happened, just so that people know, is that some investigator that didn't fully understand how the blockchain system works followed some of the paths on the blockchain of one of their clients. I think they probably found themselves to some huge wallet at Binance.
Right.
And thought, oh my goodness, all this money has been stolen and these guys are the thieves, which is not the case. So not to belittle what they did, because that was actually, from what I understand, it was fraud and it was a crime and all that. But I'm just talking about the magnitude. I think they were talking about, as you said, $3.7 billion.
Right.
I think the actual magnitude is probably anywhere between $5 to $100 million. It's not 3.6 or 3.7 billion. That's for sure.
That's a big number. That's still a big number, but that doesn't get you looking at the headlines quite as much to your point, right?
Exactly. I think it was
everyone makes that 5 million mistake, I think, sometime in their career, even in professional investigators working with law enforcement. Tell me about, what did that do for your organization? Did it increase business? Was it now a black mark on the industry, especially in Africa? Tell me the impact of that at the time.
Yeah, so there wasn't really any major impact from volumes on the platform. The customers that are buying and selling kept buying and selling, right? But there was definitely much more scrutiny from the regulators. We were in touch with many of the law enforcement agencies that contacted us to try to get information about this. We're always in touch with any type of thing that happens that affects South Africa. People are always in touch with us because we're now the largest player by volume in South Africa and in Africa. But I think the biggest thing is just reputationally, right? And this is a big mark on our industry, and it keeps happening over and over again, which is just a few bad actors. It has nothing to do with the technology. It has nothing to do with the asset class, but it's in the name of the technology and the asset class that a few bad actors come and perpetuate frauds or misdemeanors, and then basically cast this whole shadow on the entire industry, which is actually very tiring, particularly for those of us that are trying to actually review this technology as something that can serve humanity, that can improve our financial system. You get a few bad apples that kind of cast this shadow across the entire industry. So, I mean, if we have some time, like what we're recently talking about at VALR is actually we're calling for a global whistleblower program across the world, particularly for centralized exchanges. Because I know, as a CEO and co-founder of an exchange, if I want to be dishonest, and if I could lie, if I wanted to lie to the public, I could lie. And you can present all sorts of things. We could say we're doing proof of reserves and all these kind of things. But I actually, if I wanted to, right, it's very easy to mislead people. So the fact that you have a proof of reserves doesn't mean that there's actually the funds there in the first place. I always say the major proof of whether your funds are there is withdraw your funds. Withdraw your funds, right? And if they're there, then you'll be able to withdraw them. But the point is that there are many people in exchanges behind the curtains that might be able to see something that's not as it should be. And we need those people to speak up from behind the curtain to say, hey guys, this exchange is saying they're doing X, Y, Z. I work there. I'm in the operations, and actually they're doing ABC. So we need to have some protections and some incentives for people like that behind the curtain to come out for the protection of the public.
And there needs to show that there is that protection. I'm based in Canada. We had this issue with an exchange here, CoinSquare, where they were wash trading, and a whistleblower did say there was wash trading, and they got penalized and they got fired.
Exactly.
And eventually they did get compensated, but like now you're fighting to get compensated, even though you did what was right? I don't think there was the full support of regulators and even the industry as a whole, right? If you're a whistleblower, what are the chances any exchange, as you said, maybe you're not doing 100% of things wrong, maybe you value compliance, but there might be holes in some of the things that you are doing. Exchanges are going to be running to hire that whistleblower, right? At the end of the day, you want someone to do what's right, but you don't want someone reporting on anything that is wrong either. So to your point, I think there needs to be, what do you think it is? Do you think it's the fight that they would have to ensure after being a whistleblower? Do you think it's like that might be career suicide? Because those are the first thoughts that come to my mind. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, there are two things. Number one is there needs to be protection for the individual. So there can't be just like some type of an NGO that has some type of whistleblower program. It needs to come from the authorities, from the regulators, from those that have some enforcement power. All right. So there needs to be some type of protection, right? That they can provide protection. But number two, there needs to be some type of incentives, monetary incentives, right? And actually, the SEC is not the closest friend to the crypto industry at the moment. But if there's one thing that we can learn from the SEC, is that they've had a whistleblower program. They've paid out lots and lots of money from that program. And they've had people that have come forward to say, listen, there's security frauds in X, Y, and Z. I'm not talking about the crypto industry. I'm talking about beyond the crypto industry. And that served them well. And I think we need to have something similar where there's incentives for people to come up. They're taking a risk, right? As you said, it could be perceived as career suicide. Right. So what are they going to benefit from? A, obviously, ethically, they benefit from just telling the world that, hey, you could be losing your money if you continue to deal with X, Y, and Z exchange. But B, they need to be compensated financially such that, if they are ostracized,
right,
that they are financially taken care of for a while, at least, right? So the protection and the incentives are particularly important from the right authorities to make sure that the whistleblower program actually has some teeth and is effective.
And I think you also need like a network and a community and resources, right? Like if you're doing this for the first time and you're going to an authority that maybe doesn't know the process that well, or even if they do know the process that well, I think you feel like, hey, am I doing the right thing? What's the process I need to go through? So there needs to be some kind of either a task force of lawyers to help you out as well, and trained professionals to help you through this process, because the authorities can say what they want, but at the end of the day, you're the one that may lose your house because these exchanges come with some very powerful lawyers. So by the time you get done what's right, you could be homeless at the rate that these lawyers can attack you, right?
Yeah, but remember, there could be also anonymous. A lot of these whistleblower programs are anonymous. So the idea is now the whistleblower doesn't take on the perpetrator head on, but they provide the information to the regulators to actually make sure that the regulators have sufficient information to look into any particular matter. And then it's the regulators that take on the party that's misbehaving. It's not the individual. I think that individual should not be going to court against their previous employer, but they should just be providing the information so that the regulators and those in charge of public protection can actually do their job more effectively.
One of the issues with the AfriCrypt issue is that I don't think South Africa had Bitcoin as like a financial product. So the regulators there said they couldn't go after the criminals or the illicit actors. They didn't have jurisdiction. But recently, I think it was 2022, that they did now include cryptocurrency, or at least Bitcoin. Do you think that was the push that they needed to include cryptocurrency? Or from your conversation with the regulators, was just happening way before that AfriCrypt accident or incident?
What are you specifically talking about?
Like when they regulated crypto to be a financial product within their jurisdiction, so now they could pursue criminal investigations with cryptocurrency. So was that always on the plan, or does that just happen?
First of all, if you commit a crime, regardless of whether it's FX or crypto or property, crime is a crime. So the regulators in South Africa have always been able to go after people that are committing crimes. But to your point, it's been very helpful to have the authorities declare crypto assets as a financial product in South Africa, right? That's the first thing that they did. Secondly, the Reserve Bank has actually sent circulars and guidelines to the banks to say, listen, guys, the crypto asset industry isn't an illicit industry, right? And they explicitly said that the banks need to up their game and their knowledge of this asset class so that they can actually assess the risks as they would with any other industry. So I think there's a lot that's happening, not just in South Africa, but abroad. We're also approved in Europe. And as we know, there are regulations coming out in Europe. So I think a lot is happening that is putting in place a framework for the legitimization. Not that the legitimization is needed for people that understand the product because they're already in it, but it does help for the mass market to understand, okay, A, this is not an illegal product, because there's a lot of miscommunication and kind of misinformation about most of crypto is illicit activity, which we know is just not a fact, right? And then secondly, to provide access either via ETFs, etc. So all of these things are coming into play, which is the regulatory framework, the infrastructural players building, etc. Which is why, coming to my earlier comment, we're still so early. We're really early. And over time, all of these different things will start coming in and forming this foundation of what I think is going to be a glorious system to come.
When you're talking about working at a bank that was obviously very forward thinking, they're part of financial, blockchain consortiums. What was your thought process? Where did you see the void where you're like 2018 down market? You know what? The best thing to do is create a crypto exchange here in South Africa. You have a cushy bank job. You at least get to talk about blockchain and cryptocurrency 3 hours out of the month, if not more. What made you decide? What hole did you see that you were planning to fill?
So it's a great question. And I literally asked myself, I remember I was sitting on my desk looking out the window, and I asked myself, I do have a good job that's paying me a nice salary. I could stay here and it's very comfortable. And I asked myself, later on in my life, I'm say 80 or whatever it may be, and I look back, would I be proud of myself for making the decision to stay in comfort where I could take a leap that's very uncomfortable, but hopefully make a bigger impact in life? And the decision was very clear. It's take the leap. Now, this isn't, let's be very clear, the decision that was made to do this happened towards the end of 2017, which is when the prices were going up in a big way, right? And then when I actually left the bank, it was post the $20,000 kind of, local all-time high, and the price was going down. And that's when I left and we started VALR. We launched VALR in December of 2018. And the price then was about $3,000 US dollars. So it was actually pretty close to the bottom at that time. But as they say, the best building is done in the bear market, because you kind of get rid of all the noise, you focus on the product, you focus on building a proper service. So I'm very grateful that happened. And also the last couple of years in the bear market have also been a time where we've been building our perpetual futures. We've been building our margin engine, our risk engine. That's to take into consideration the futures product that we've just launched, liquidation engines, all this kind of stuff. That's all kind of part and parcel of creating a more global product. So that's where our next stage is now. We're the dominant player by volume in Africa. We now want to go and actually deliver our product, which you think is a fantastic product, to the world. So that's the next phase.
How did you deal with those early regulations? I know you were speaking to some of the regulators there, but there was still some vagueness in the regulation at that time. How did you navigate a large crypto exchange at that time?
So obviously we weren't large at the time. We were non-existent at the time, but we went to the regulators and we basically said, this is what we want to do. So pre-launch, we were sitting in the offices of the regulators, said, this is what we want to do. What are the laws that apply to us? And basically they said, actually, this is outside the scope of we don't really know what this is. How do you classify it? And so we said, well, are we allowed to proceed or should we wait? And they said, there's nothing stopping you from proceeding. So our approach has always been one of transparency and compliance. And so as we go along, we keep the regulators abreast of what we're doing. We have good relationships with those regulators. There are, a couple of years ago, we had tokenized stocks that was in our development, in our dev environment, where we wanted to actually put into production. And we went to the regulators and we said, hey guys, we've got this tokenized stock. It's a crypto asset, but it's, this is Tesla, right? Can we put this in production? And they said, no, what's a tokenized stock? No. What? Wait. No, don't proceed. We need to understand what this is first, and then we can proceed. To date, we've never actually launched that because we never heard back from them. So there have been some learnings because we want to be compliant always, but also with regulators, and I can say this publicly, they're very conservative, right? And as they should be.
Right.
But they also have a dual process, which is to be conservative to protect the public, but also to enable a flourishing environment for technological progress and advancement. But it's very rare that you'll have a regulator that will say, listen, this is new, but we're going to give you a written piece of paper to say we approve for you to go ahead and let's see where it goes. That's not how that works. So I don't know if, can you still hear me?
Yeah,
Okay.
I could.
So basically, what our approach is to talk to the regulators as much as possible. And then also to have our legal system and our legal team look at the laws to say what's possible and what's not possible, and to get actual legal opinions that say, you can do that or you can't do that. And then that's what guides us with our approach.
And now real world asset tokenization is like blasting off. You're like, we're ready. Let us into the game. But talk to me about the real regulators, which are the banks, right? At the end of the day, you can get as much from regulators as possible, but the banks are ones starting that threshold to maintain a bank account, which you need to operate your business. How difficult was it to maintain bank accounts during that time? And even now, especially everything that's happening in the States with SVB Bank, and also, with what happened with FTX and Binance.
So our first bank account that we got was relatively straightforward, but it was early again. This was like in 2018. And then when we launched at the end of 2018 signups, and then we actually launched trading in 2019. In the middle of that year, we were contacted by our main banking partner to say, listen, we are going to be offboarding all crypto players from our platform. And so at that point, we said, okay, well, why is that the case? And they said, we don't have the risk appetite for it. And we said, this doesn't seem to be in line with what the FATF and the global regulators are talking about. This is de-risking, but it's de-risking in a bad way, which is don't get rid of an industry because then you lose sight into that industry.
Right.
But they didn't listen to us. And then we basically had to go and get other bank accounts. We were lucky that we have some very strong banking partners now, but we literally had to shift our banking rails from one to another, which is obviously causes a lot of operational disruption that we had to navigate. But recently, that same bank that offboarded us, they now have a crypto team. I think it's probably like 5-person strong. They're thinking about doing a whole bunch of stuff themselves in this space. And I've always said it's just a matter of time before they not only just start rebanking, customers like ourselves, but actually start offering crypto products to the public.
Yeah, they're like, forget rebanking. We'll become a crypto bank.
100%.
What we need a middleman for, right?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
You're on LinkedIn. I see you post some really great things. One thing I did see on LinkedIn is like Obama with, a synthetic ID. Like there's a real threat now with AI being able to create generative AI IDs, identification. We're seeing them being sold on the dark web. How do you protect your consumers from things like synthetic IDs and these, really, really well-crafted pictures that they would be submitting to you as part of the onboarding process?
Yeah, you're right. AI is getting very advanced, but also the protections that use AI are also getting advanced, right? So for things like KYC, that's not our bread and butter from the perspective that we run an exchange. And so our expertise is dealing with the matching engine and security and things of that nature. And so we work with partners whose full-time reason of existence is to put in place systems that combat this type of stuff, right? So we're working with a couple of different KYC partners to actually onboard people through the entire Know Your Customer process. And then we have a series of information. If someone wants to get into their account, we do kind of live videos, but live videos can sometimes be an issue, as we know, with AI. But then there's a whole series of security questions you need to answer, a whole security protocol that you need to pass before getting access to your account, as an example. So it's a dual process thing. Number one is the KYC right at the beginning. We don't accept anybody without full KYC. And then the second thing is you need to serve people and make sure that they are who they say they are. And there's a whole host of kind of steps that you need to go through that are actually, to be honest, very inconvenient to the end customer. But it has to be that way. Otherwise, you compromise on security.
Now, VALR, like when I hear about VALR, I associate with like sophisticated traders. You look on your website, you even mentioned it here, you're pretty much a one-stop shop, right? People come to you and they can do pretty much everything using digital assets. What do you feel is the most common use for your platform, or is it maybe even some of the most unique uses that people are coming to your platform in droves for?
Yeah, so we have about 1,000 institutional customers and about 500,000 retail customers. And so we have a lot of people that are just coming and buying and holding on the platform with the view that, Bitcoin or even stable coins in Africa are a hedge towards the devaluation of any local currency. We have a lot of sophisticated traders that are employing or deploying very sophisticated trading strategies, right? And so they look at kind of differentials that are happening in different markets as arbitrage plays, but even within South Africa, there are capital controls. And so there's a little bit of a premium in the South African price. And some of these advanced traders look at that premium and they trade the magnitude of the premium itself, understanding that this is where it generally is. And if it goes up, then they'll, short it because it's going to mean revert or, things like that. So there's a lot of sophisticated trading through our API, which has been very well received from our global client base. And then there's some remittances that people do. A lot of people sending value or capital into the country will do so with crypto, come send it onto VALR, convert it into Rand, and then send it into, the traditional financial system. So we have a whole range from the retail traders all the way to the sophisticated traders that are trading on the platform.
Have you seen any emergence of trends, maybe in the last, 2 years during this bear market where certain usage has picked up? There was a big NFT hype back in 2021. So have you seen any sort of trends that you didn't notice maybe before between 2018 and 2020 before the pandemic started?
Yeah, I think probably the main trend that we see is obviously as the price goes up, the retail kind of market comes in. And then when the price goes down, they go out. We learned a very tough lesson, which is that we started trying to market our product and VALR in the bear market. Marketing is never going to lose with a price that's going down, a Bitcoin price is never going to win with a price that's going down, right? So we had to pull some of that back. I think one of the other trends is that we're starting to see many more players build upon VALR for a bunch of different services. There might be remittances. There might be, right now at VALR, for example, you can go and use your Bitcoin and crypto to buy at a supermarket called Pick and Pay, which is one of the largest supermarkets. There's more than 1,500 stores around the country in South Africa. You can go and use your VALR app and you can go and pay for groceries using Bitcoin. So I think the idea, and I would still say like the majority of what we're seeing is still a speculative environment, right?
All right.
And when I say speculative, I'm talking about speculation from protection from devaluation of your own currency or just appreciation of Bitcoin or whatever it may be. But more and more, we're seeing these add-ons, which is kind of the payments piece, the remittance piece that's coming into place, the acceptance of it for goods and services. That's what we're seeing more and more of. We're not close to the unit of account stage in monetary theory where we're pricing things in Bitcoin, although some people do price it, but it's still so volatile. But it doesn't make too much sense when most of the economy is in fiat. But we're kind of moving from that store of value into kind of the means of exchange. And I think in the future, we will see crypto and Bitcoin being used as a unit of account.
You had mentioned stable coins. You also mentioned things like capital control issues, maybe the restrictions or the expense of sending cross-border payments. How much or how big is a stable coin? We've seen it go up. I think 60% of a lot of the on-chain traffic is now based on stable coins. How about for you? Where are you seeing stable coins position itself in the digital asset ecosystem there in Africa?
Yeah, I can look actually right now. So we used to see our Bitcoin Rand. So we've got the largest Bitcoin Rand trading venue in the world out of all platforms, including Binance is over here, but we've got something like at least 10 times their volume. But Bitcoin ZAR used to be the largest trading pair. It still is, but it used to be by a long shot. And USDT ZAR and USDC ZAR are also coming up in a big way. And sometimes I think we have even seen days where some of those pairs have actually exceeded Bitcoin Rand trading, right? So I haven't looked at the on-chain analytics, but from a volume perspective, we're actually starting to see a lot of demand and trading for stable coins as well as just Bitcoin.
What's interesting, when I'm researching for this topic, South Africa's always had maybe like not a dark cloud, but just that overarching theme of apartheid. Nelson Mandela seemed like it just ended 30 years ago with Nelson Mandela being released and becoming prime minister, president. I'm not sure which one you have. We have a prime minister here in Canada. Yeah. Do you think the decentralization nature, the censorship resistance has opened up the floodgates for more participation from the average consumer to, combat some of the bias and racism that maybe South Africa has seen over the years?
It's a charged question.
Very charged. And that's why I asked you. I know you're the person that,
I wouldn't bucket those two things together. I think they're quite distinct. There's a lot of social challenges in South Africa for sure that existed pre-apartheid, the ending of apartheid, or during apartheid, and it still exists post-apartheid. There are a lot of challenges with racism and inequality of the rich and the gap between the rich and the poor, etc. I take quite a conservative approach because at this stage, I'm quite public and vociferous in saying that I don't think Bitcoin and crypto is for everybody in the world right now. And the reason I say that is that there are many people living hand to mouth, earning a little bit of fiat currency to be able to pay the next day or the same day or the following week rent or whatever it may be. And I think for those people, while we're trying to build a system that will serve them for sure, I would never, ever recommend that someone goes and buys Bitcoin for a fiat debt that they have that's going to, mature in a month, not knowing if this is going to be up or down. I think that's a very dangerous thing to do. So I think there's a lot of work for us to do in society to make a more even playing field for the people that are less fortunate. And there are many, the majority of the people, as you know, they're just a pyramid in our world. And so the way I look at Bitcoin and crypto is that it's a tool, and it will help us allow for more frictionless finance. But a tool is a tool, right? It's not a system itself. And I think we've got a lot of work as society to try to solve our social issues, racism, the divide between the rich and the poor, gender issues, things of that nature. But I'm not one of those that says, "Oh, Bitcoin fixes everything." I say that deliberately because I think our challenges are much more multifaceted, and it is very naive to think, "Oh, Bitcoin fixes." No, we've got a lot of hard work on our hands as a society to fix our issues. Yes, Bitcoin and crypto is a tool that will assist us, but let's not forget the hard work ahead of us.
What's interesting is when people talk about the underbanked and, unbanked, they always usually refer to Africa as like kind of that use case. And Bitcoin was supposed to help with financial inclusion. Have you seen it help at all? Like just being able to use your crypto exchange to convert to, stable coin or to rand and maybe send abroad. Have you seen it help that, or have we not made a dent in financial inclusion using
I'll
cryptocurrency?
give you a very practical example, right? We really aspire to serve everybody, right? People at the so-called bottom of the pyramid, all the way to the top. Like it's really a big aspiration of VALR to serve humanity.
Right.
And then we have something called VALR Pay. VALR Pay is you can send, rands or crypto for free to anybody in the world, basically, to any cell phone number, any email address. It's all on the platform. You have to be a customer, but if you're not a customer, you'll receive an SMS or an email that says sign up, and then you receive it, right?
Sign up and get your money. That's usually
Free.
a pretty quick interaction, right?
But the reason I bring that up is that I used to start sending, some tips to, a waiter or a security guard or whatever it may be. And I realized because after 3 days, if it's not claimed, then it reverts back into your account.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't, many of the times it wasn't getting claimed. And this is a decent amount of money for some people. And so I started talking to people and I said, why didn't you claim the funds? And they said, well, your platform requires an email address to sign up. I don't have an email address, right?
That's interesting.
So for most of the world, everybody's on email.
Yeah.
But in Africa, there's a huge sliver of people that do not even have an email address. They have a phone, they have a cell phone number. They're conservative with mobile banking and stuff like that. But that just shows you a little bit of kind of where we are. And like a lot of crypto platforms require emails, one of the security features, right, to authenticate or to get a code or in addition to your phone. So these are some of the challenges that we're working with, which is like kind of beyond what you would actually think initially.
So in 2022, you raised $50 million in a Series B, which is a lot of money, especially at that time. I feel like VALR thrives in a bear market, right? Like I feel like VALR is the chip. You love a good bear market to build. That's a lot of money to get during that time, though. Like I think, and one of the plans was obviously to expand. You're talking about global plans. I think one of the plans at that time was to expand more in Africa itself. How successful have you been? Like, has it been challenging? Because we do see bans from certain regulators, on and off bans. How challenging was it to, continue that success that you saw in South Africa to other parts of Africa?
Africa is a very challenging place. It's over 50 countries and, maybe about 40 currencies and, different central banks, capital controls across the continent, different regulatory regimes. So, Nigeria is one of the big markets there that recently opened up. So we're actually making some headway there. But before we were about to get into Nigeria, and then the central bank came and instituted a ban on all banks working with crypto companies. Right? Kenya is a similar point, which is also a relatively large market. We can't get a bank account. There are some of our competitors that will kind of play cat and mouse with the banks and the regulators and say that they're a digital platform, they don't do crypto. And then people will find out that they're crypto and they'll close the bank down and open up another one. That's not our style. We are who we are. We'll tell you who we are. If we're welcome, we'll come. If we're not welcome and it's illegal to operate in your country, we won't operate there. So Africa is very difficult. Even a place like Zambia, we entered into Zambia about November 2022, if I'm not mistaken. And about 3 or 4 months later, we had to actually bring those pairs down because we had banking issues and we couldn't service our customer base. So we had to actually, pay out the withdrawals to our customers where we could, and then basically delist those pairs because the banking facilities weren't able to accommodate. So everybody's fine there in Zambia from our customers' perspective, but unfortunately we can't continue serving them, which is a real shame, right? So it's a very difficult place to navigate. Not impossible, but it takes a lot of work, and we're working on it.
Did you find similar challenges in places like India? I think that was one of your areas you were targeting. And where else are you looking around the world that has maybe a similar framework, like Africa, where you're not scared to roll up your hands and get into a conversation with the regulators and transparently, maintain those bank accounts?
Yeah. So we were going to go into India again. Then India had a regulatory change and their volumes went from hundreds of millions of dollars a day to, just in the single digits of millions of dollars a day. I think it's still around there. And that's because of the 30% tax, TDS and GST and a whole bunch of stuff. So we actually put that on hold until we have some more clarity there. But we are licensed or we're approved to provide crypto services out of Poland. So for the European region, we've got an initial approval from VALR in Dubai. We're in the process with Mauritius, and we're hopefully going to be getting one of the first licenses out of the South African regime coming shortly. So to answer your question, it's been very difficult, right? Based on where the maturation of the regulatory regimes have been across the world. And particularly for a platform that wants to be very compliant to ensure that there's protection of our customers and that we're in line with kind of what the laws require. You got to be very careful and make sure that you're not overstepping any bounds, which could get you into trouble. And we've seen other exchanges that have taken those steps. On the one hand, they've become large exchanges. On the other hand, some of the founders are facing, prison sentence, very short. So we definitely want to do things in the right way. Our next kind of phase is we are targeting, we have dollar on and off ramps as well. And so we're targeting a global audience, and we're going to be actually announcing what we think is going to be the largest crypto reward program that's ever existed from a centralized exchange. I won't get into that just yet, but I'm hoping in the next month or 6 weeks, we'll be able to announce that and really take our product to traders across the world, which we're very excited about.
And we'll include in the show notes, if you do mention it, we might even update the intro to let people know exactly what that is. If this episode doesn't air by the time that amazing announcement comes up. Talk to me a little bit. And you mentioned a couple times here in the conversation, crypto might not be and Bitcoin might not be for everybody. It definitely doesn't solve all the problems. But you went as far as in 2018 writing an op-ed for CoinDesk, basically with this same sentiment that crypto or Bitcoin doesn't solve all problems. Do you feel like your opinion has changed over the last, now 6 years ago? Do you feel like your opinion's changed a little bit and it does solve maybe more problems than you thought it could solve back in 2018?
Are you talking about the real world asset, the property one?
No, which we kind of discussed here, where you're like, hey, we were ready to go, but it may not solve all problems if the regulators aren't on board with it.
So I do stand by that op-ed, which is to say a lot of people are wanting this real world assets, right? real world tokenization of real world assets, I personally think that people are getting a bit too excited about it. And the reason I say that is that the real world and tokenization require a reconciliation, right? And so the beauty about Bitcoin, which a lot of the skeptics think is actually the Achilles heel, which is actually not the Achilles heel, it's the beauty of it, is that, excuse me, Bitcoin is not backed by anything. That's actually the benefit of Bitcoin. As if it were backed by something, then you need to be worried about the recon behind that, whatever it's being backed by. And so whenever we put like property on a blockchain, well, just because you got the keys to the address on the blockchain, if some squatters come and sit on your land and you can't get access to it, I'm sorry, but you can't go and tell the squatters, hey, I got the keys, so can you please vacate? No, they're going to be there, right? So you're going to need to go and ask a central authority to assist you in enforcing your rights to get them out of that piece of land or that property. And if you're going to have to rely on them to do that, why can't you rely on them to run a central database? I don't understand, right? So this is where I think some of the discrepancy comes in. The beauty about Bitcoin, there is no recon, as I mentioned. There is no central authority that can enforce your rights because the key enforces your rights.
Right.
But in the real world, the key doesn't enforce your rights.
I think that's such a perfect example. And I think that, Instagram, it seems like those squatting videos are coming up more and more. And you're right. The only way they're able to get them off the property is by bringing in law enforcement. And to your point, well, if they're bringing it over a centralized party, we might as well just let them keep everything in that database. The blockchain isn't going to help you remove squatters. That is such a great point.
And don't get me wrong, there can be like, you can have a distributed ledger maybe with much more transparency and things like that. But I'm just saying like the true Bitcoin, like blockchain type of scenario where you have no centralized authority. I think it's taking it a step too far when it comes to the real world.
If you were to write a follow-up to that article with everything that you're seeing, maybe in AI and machine learning, is there things that you think that Bitcoin now using this technology could solve for that you had no idea it would be able to even impact maybe 6 years ago?
I mean, I think that the cross and where AI meets crypto is going to be tremendously powerful. I can't even imagine what that will look like. But, we've had glimpses in the past of like streaming payments, right? So instead of getting your salary once a month, it's streamed to you as you're working, right? Like streaming music, you get streaming payments, right? Just the automation of using smart contracts to enforce certain kind of conditions and also to kind of get rid of a lot of the admin that's historically been associated with workflows. I think though that when we have like self-driving cars and we have AI and we have all of these beautiful technologies, there will still be a need for the seamless transfer of value. And I don't see that seamless transfer of value being provisioned by our traditional financial system today. I see that seamless transfer of value being provisioned by the crypto industry, by the crypto technology. It just makes sense where the AI and when real world assets like that come in, but start using payments and stuff like that to interact, the IoT and stuff like that. So I think that's very powerful. I think much beyond my imagination, but I think we cannot imagine what that will look like. And it's definitely not going to be based on a national currency when we're talking about, platforms that are world encompassing that require a global currency as well.
As we finish up this podcast, I know you gave us a little hint of some news that might be coming with VALR, but tell me everything, like what features are you excited about? What use cases are you excited about? What markets are you really excited about? Like, where do you see VALR? If we were to have this same conversation at the start of 2025, what would you love to talk about then that you can talk about now?
Sure. I would love to see us as a really strong infrastructural player that is a pillar for this entire system that we're talking about, so that we have a whole bunch of assets, a whole bunch of liquidity, a whole bunch of different products and services, whether it's spot or derivatives that provide, protection or hedging strategies for people. And then to expand our API from what it is already, which is a world-class API, and to see the continued trend of our customers building more products and services on top of our infrastructure to be able to better serve the world. And from a financial services perspective, right? So It might be payments, it might be investment portfolios, it might be hedging strategies, it might be, inflation protection, whatever it may be, but using a very seamless product to be able to facilitate a much grander financial system that's accessible to all. So that's at the very highest level, what our aspiration is just to help make the world a little bit of a better place, to promote civilization. A few steps.
When you see things like Binance and FTX, does that kind of validate your plan to be like compliance and transparency first? Like when you see things like, I'm sure you've looked to your legal department like, hey, how are they allowed to do those things? That doesn't make sense. That product is not allowed. How are they able to, sponsor arenas with, these tight margins during a bear market? What happened? Obviously, it's a black eye for the industry, but does that help you like carry on and continue with, leading with compliance and leading with good and leading with consumers in mind?
Definitely. So, I mean, if you think we're not here for the short game, right? And in the short game, people can take all sorts of shortcuts. They can lie and all that kind of stuff. And they might make a few extra bucks. I think I'm a very big believer in the type of karma that it comes back to get you, and that you need to live your life in a worthy fashion and an upright with integrity. But we're not here for the short game, and we're here for the long game. So I think there are other platforms like ourselves that are compliant. They're wanting to serve people, protect them. They're not trying to be cowboys. We obviously always want to push the technological envelope, but that's a very different thing from, like, just as an example, there's customer funds and then there's proprietary exchange funds. You never, ever, ever touch the customer funds, let alone take even a cent or a Satoshi out. That's out of bounds. If you're able to cross that chasm and to do that just for a little bit, then you've lost the plot.
Yeah.
Right. So just things like that. And that's, by the way, that's nothing to do with like compliance. Obviously, that's totally illegal.
Right.
But just like as a culture, you need to know that there's not even a conversation that happened, but that's totally out of the question. Right. And unfortunately, I think there are still some platforms out there that don't see it that way. And they might see, oh, an extra pool here to maximize profit. I think over time, those platforms will be caught out. But these platforms that have integrity and compliance at their core and their foundation, I think those are the platforms that we'll still see standing in the future.
And to your point, like the boundaries you're pushing is to get better access to your customer, get better products. It's not to like, hey, we want to like onboard people with just an email address and no KYC. It's more so like, can we get our customers the best rate global? Like it's more pushing the boundary to support your customers where they're pushing the boundaries to support their profits. It's two different boundaries, I think, being pushed.
And there are, just to be clear, we're law abiding, but that doesn't mean that we agree philosophically with all of the laws that we have to abide. So as an example, in South Africa, there's capital controls.
Right.
And we have to abide by that. We do. But I'm a very vocal person saying, guys, this is not in the service to our people in this country. Right. So let's get rid of that. Or even KYC. I think KYC, it needs to be improved. We need to obviously have the information. And there are basically improvements that are happening, by the way, which are very good. But it's very important for us to have a very open dialogue with the regulators to say, these are our pain points. How do we make sure that we're protecting the customer and the public interest while also allowing people to flourish and to do what they need to do in a compliant fashion?
Farzam, I think this is the interview that people really needed to hear from an exchange like yourself. They really needed to understand the mechanics and the thought process behind everything that you're doing at VALR. We're so appreciative you took your time to come and talk to us about it and have a real genuine conversation about what's going on in the industry, but also an exciting conversation about how you're going to be bringing all these ethical things and products and services around the world. So I think that's what globally we need more access to more products working with exchanges that we can trust. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate it.